Part 58. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 571. Chapter 571, If it has nothing to do with you, it will lead to chaos. The master replied with a smile, the Duke of Guo is joking, so why is it impossible? We, Jing Zheyin, have no grudges against the Duke of Guo, so we will not just find the sufferer and fight for his life or death without having anything to do. Are you going to send the prince to prison? The Duke of Guo was anxious, but he did not dare to raise his voice, so he lowered his voice and said, the master of suffering has already dealt with it, and it is impossible to pursue this matter any further. Even if a merchant's family gave him such courage, he would not dare to agree. Our duke's government is against us, something must have gone wrong. Logically speaking, although the duke of the country is ordinary and mediocre, just lying on the merits of his ancestors, he is not that stupid. Helping, there is a saying that if things have nothing to do with oneself, it will lead to chaos. Now that his only son is in jail, and there is a life and death lawsuit, he may be beheaded, and he can't calm down no matter what. The master was also a father. After all, he felt a little compassion and whispered, the Duke is right. Why did the host family change their mind? How brave they are. He stretched out his index finger and pointed at the sunny sky above his head, then turned around and went back. The Duke of Guo was left with his mouth open as if he had been struck by lightning. He was stunned for a long time without reacting. What a courage, how big, are you so brave? He seemed to understand, but he didn't understand. He is a prince who sticks to his duties and never stands in line in the court. He shrinks his neck just to keep himself rich and peaceful. Why did he offend that person? The chief attendant was watching from behind, worried about his master's misfortune, and stepped forward to remind him carefully, my lord, are you going back to your residence to rest? No, go to the residence of Grand Scholar Lu. Duke Guo suddenly woke up, jumped on the carriage and asked the driver to leave quickly. In the yard of the Lu family, Lu's Haiheng took a rare break today, lying on the rocking chair with his father, drinking tea and chatting. This summer, Lu's Haiheng was running around a lot, worthy of his official status. He was already fat, but after being so busy, he didn't lose any weight at all. He just changed from a white fat man to a black fat man. Mr. Lu saw it in his eyes and felt pain in his heart, but he didn't say a word. Find wealth and honor in danger. This official position was obtained easily, and I don't know how many people were envious and criticized him. Now my son is tanned and he has worked hard. Anyone who is not blind can see it. In autumn, when corn and potatoes are harvested everywhere, no one will dare to gossip anymore. This painstaking process is also a process of consolidating Qingyun Road. The two men were both happy when they talked about the upcoming harvest. At this time, they were surprised when they heard that the Duke of Guo was visiting. Lu's Haiheng hurriedly went to greet the guests in person. Although I don't have much contact with the Duke's mansion on weekdays and only have a nod of acquaintance, he is also a Duke, so I always have to show some respect. Soon, Lu's Haiheng led the Duke in. Mr. Lu stood up to greet him and invited him to drink tea. How could the Duke of Guo be in the mood to drink tea? He said straight to the point, Brother Lu, when you first entered Kyoto, I helped you once. Now that I am in trouble, I beg you, can you help me too? Mr. Lu laughed when he heard this. He was a bit unfamiliar at first, but because he was so not polite, he became more friendly. When I first entered Kyoto, my wallet was stolen by a thief in a tea house. Thanks to you for rescuing me, I haven't forgotten it after all these years, but you didn't mention it either. How did you find me at my door today and ask me to return the favor? The Duke of Guo sighed, as if a rubber ball had been pierced with a hole by these words. He was instantly deflated and deflated. You are not the treacherous son of mine who was captured by Jing Zheyin just now. Mr. Lu is at home most of the time, but recently I often go to Bywin Garden, but after listening to a few gossips, I asked, it's the matter of jealousy, didn't you solve it by suppressing the owner of the suffering? The Duke of Guo looked around and lowered his voice and said, I asked someone about it, but the owner suddenly regretted it and insisted on pursuing my son's fault. Moreover, the owner has great courage because... He pointed to the sky, his expression half angry and half doubtful. Mr. Lu and Lu's Haiheng looked at each other, also surprised. Mr. Lu asked, are you sure you can't talk nonsense about this? The Duke of Guo nodded and sighed, if I weren't sure, I wouldn't have found you here. Back then, I just happened to help you out, but now I have the audacity to come to ask for help, and I'm so ashamed. I really can't understand. I think you can always see that person. Have you heard anything? How did I make that person unhappy? We have been living with our tail between our legs for many years. Did you mess with that one? Mr. Lu smiled faintly and said, you have your tail between your legs, but your son wants to walk sideways. The Duke's face turned red and he wanted to spit out a mouthful of blood. He was so frustrated. He gritted his teeth and said, this is the heir to the family, so I can't help but pamper him. As long as this matter is over and his life is saved, I will lock him in the house and try my best to have children. Mr. Lu almost laughed when he heard this. Finally, after thinking about it, he said, I haven't been to the palace recently, and I haven't heard about the emperor's dissatisfaction with you. So, let's Haiheng go and find out. Lu's Haiheng understood, quickly stood up, saluted and walked out. Mr. Lu had been drinking tea with the Duke for an hour. When he was restless, Lu's Haiheng finally came back in a hurry. He didn't show off, and sat down and said, the Northern Expeditionary Army has returned victoriously, but the national treasury is empty and there is no money to pay pensions. The Ministry of Industry wants to repair various rivers, and it also needs a large amount of money. I know this. I also went to court and heard those people arguing. It gave me a headache. The Duke became anxious and asked, but what does this have to do with my son? Lu's Haiheng coughed twice and continued, at this time, the prince of the Duke's mansion competed with the wealthy businessmen to the brothel girls. He spent a lot of money and even beat the wealthy businessman to death by mistake. He paid tens of thousands of dollars in compensation. After taking the blame with his long-term follower, he still walked free and roamed the streets. Inside, the Duke of Guo was stunned for a long time and said nothing, but his face became increasingly pale. He finally understood. The man in the court, or rather the man in the palace, was so hungry that he, a pig, had grown fat all over his body and was jumping around in all kinds of ways. Who wouldn't be jealous? Now that the buttocks of his pig are being held down, it depends on him whether to wait for someone to cut the meat or to take the initiative to cut the meat. Mr. Lu couldn't help but shake his head. Spoiling a child is like killing a child. Although the Duke's title is high, he is really not as good as him when it comes to educating his sons. Thinking like this, he looked at his eldest son, his eyes full of pride. Lu's Haiheng was drinking tea when he suddenly received his father's loving eyes and almost choked and coughed. The Duke of Guo was silent for a long time, and finally stood up and thanked Mr. Lu, thank you very much for today. I'll take my leave now. End of this chapter. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 572. Chapter 572, 100,000 Tales, by a Dream Come True. Mr. Lu nodded, but he couldn't bear it, and finally advised him, if you lose money and avoid disaster, you should look after the younger members of the family in the future. The Duke of Guo sighed, turned around and walked away. In such a long time, everyone knew that the prince of the country had been arrested and sent to Jingzhaoyin prison. Others just saw it as a joke and fun, but relatives and friends from the Duke's mansion wanted to come and ask questions. Whether you can help or not, Just showing up at this time is a help in times of need, and everyone will appreciate it. The Duke's wife's eyes were swollen from crying. She didn't drink a morsel of water or eat a morsel of food. Finally, looking forward to the return of the Duke, everyone naturally wanted to ask a few questions. The Duke of Guo simply replied, "It's not a big deal. There is a case that requires the Crown Prince to cooperate with the investigation. We can send the Crown Prince back tomorrow." This sounds really far-fetched. That's the heir apparent to the Duke of Guo. If he hadn't committed a serious crime, would Jing Ziyin's officials dare to tie him up in the street and send him to prison? But the Duke said so, and no one can question it. Do you expect other people's children to commit crimes? After sitting for a while, everyone left quickly. After the house was quiet, the Duke dismissed all the servants and discussed with his old wife. Hearing the whole story, the old wife also regretted, "I was the one who harmed my son. If I had detained him at home, wouldn't such a thing have happened? It's too late to say anything now. Hurry up and prepare money. As long as the man calms down, his son will be fine." The Duke of Guo sighed, "Fetch your son out this time, and I will teach him later. You must not interfere again." This time I went all out to beg the Lu family, and then I understood the ins and outs. The next time, I can only turn a blind eye, watch him die in prison. The Duke's wife nodded quickly, okay, I will definitely not interfere." The old couple got together and took possession of the family property, and started to organize it while their hearts ached. The next day was the small court meeting. As soon as the emperor returned to the imperial study, he heard that Duke Zhenguo asked for an audience. He smiled and nodded. Soon, Manager Yi led the Duke of Zhen in. The Duke of Zhenguo is not stupid, and he never mentions his son. He just knelt down, kowtowed respectfully, and directly offered 100,000 taels of silver notes, talking about sharing the worries of the emperor and the country. Sure enough, the emperor helped him up with his own hands and did not hesitate to praise him. Even if the Duke of Zhenguo knew it was fake, he couldn't help but be excited. This is the emperor, and he speaks with golden words. He kowtowed excitedly to show his loyalty again, and finally stood up and sat down, his back slightly straightened. The emperor was in a good mood and started chatting with him. "How is the Duke's health lately?" "Thanks to the great blessing of the emperor, I am still in good health." The Duke hesitated for a moment, then finally said, "My son is troubled and often makes me angry. I plan to teach him well behind closed doors for 2 years." The emperor nodded in agreement. "This is a serious matter. Children must be beaten often and taught with heart, so that they can become talented." At the end, he seemed to suddenly remember and asked, "I heard that the prince is interested in the girl from Jiangning Haofu." The Duke of Zhenguo trembled in his heart. He didn't know why the emperor asked this, so he carefully replied, "The mentality of a young man is just to say a few stupid words occasionally. No, what the Duke said is wrong. It makes sense to start a family and build a career first. After a man marries a wife, he will stop having fun." The emperor smiled and said, "Today, the Duke is sharing my worries, and I am also sharing my worries. The Duke of the state is worried about this, and the Duke of the state should go back and wait for the decree." Zhenguo Gong vaguely guessed something, but thought it was impossible. Although he is the Duke of the country, he understands the situation of his family very well, but it is just an appearance and has no real power. And the Jiangning mansion is the queen's maternal clan. The girl that my son likes is the queen's cousin. Even, I heard that this girl was prepared for Marquis Inting. So, no matter how much trouble his son made at home, he always stopped him and refused to allow his old wife to inquire about the Wu family. Could it be that my son's dream will come true now? Perhaps if my son's wish comes true, he will really calm down and live a good life instead of playing games." The Duke of Zhen's mind was in turmoil and he didn't know how to get out of the palace. Outside the palace gate, many people saw his expression and thought that the prince was definitely dead. Then, on the morning of the next day, the prince, who was in ragged clothes and with a black face, was sent back to the Duke of Gen's residence. Although his miserable appearance made the Duke and Madame burst into tears, luckily his arms and legs were still intact. The Duke's wife didn't mind being dirty, so she hugged her son without letting go. "Son, you've made me worry so much. Don't get into trouble again, let's study hard at home." The prince was almost choked to death by his mother. He finally struggled to get away and said, "Mom, I'm hungry. I want to eat meat, I want to eat fish, I want to eat roasted chicken, I want everything." "Hey, hey," the Duke's wife finally reacted, and immediately asked people to prepare food, and arranged for others to take a bath, change clothes, and comb his hair for his son. After all the work was done, the prince sat in front of the table again. He didn't even use the chopsticks. He just grabbed an elbow and gnawed it open. He was in prison for the first time in his life, and finally saw what purgatory on earth was like. The rotten and moldy underground cell was infested with rats and cockroaches. The cold wind was blowing, and people screamed or cried from time to time, all night long. For 2 whole days and 2 nights, he only got a bowl of gruel, which was even snatched away by his fellow cellmates. His clothes and pants were also stripped off, and he was kicked around like a ball. He couldn't beat him even if he wanted to, and he was beaten even worse when he brought up his reputation as the governor of the country. Just when he thought he was going to die there, he was finally taken out. Seeing his son like this, the Duke of Gen was also heartbroken, but he still hardened his heart and said, "I have learned a lesson this time. From now on, you will stay at home. If you dare to go out and wander around again, I will break your legs." The prince had long been afraid, but he still said stubbornly, "Bring Miss Billion home to me, and I will never go out again." "Humph, you said this. Remember, you must keep your promise," the Duke of Guo said with a strange expression. But the prince's eyes lit up when he heard this. "Father, can you allow me to marry Miss Billion back? She is Miss Billion from the second room of Zhongning Ho Mansion. She is the legitimate daughter, not someone else." The Duke of Guo did not dare to say anything, and said vaguely, "As long as you are obedient, then give it a try." The prince wanted to ask more questions, but the housekeeper had already rushed over and shouted, "My lord, someone from the palace has announced a decree." Everyone quickly got busy and soon arrived in the front yard, setting up the incense table to receive the order. After the who announced the decree was about to be sent away, the prince held the imperial decree in his hand and still couldn't believe it. "Father, mother, I want to marry Miss Billion." The Duke of Guo also breathed a sigh of relief, but he still glared at his son fiercely. The Duke's wife was happy for her son. "Yes, you are getting married." The prince jumped 3 feet high with joy. "I'm going to get married, I'm going to marry Miss Billion." End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 573. Chapter 573 Is the Wu family going to rebel? Not to mention how happy the Duke's house was, even the pain in his body after being cut off 100,000 taels of silver was healed. I just say that there is no airtight wall in the world, and there are no secrets in the new capital. The eldest son of the Genkuo Duke's mansion was arrested. The Duke went to the palace to offer money to relieve the country's worries. The eldest son was released the next day. He even got a marriage decree. The eldest son was about to marry the queen's cousin, the legitimate daughter of the Zhongning Marquis mansion. In other words, the Crown Prince Genkuo will be the emperor's brother-in-law from now on. This world is so magical. No, it should be said that silver is so magical. With 100,000 taels, can the dead be brought back to life and your wishes come true? Some people are even a little tempted, thinking about donating 10,000 or 20,000 to make a wish for their family, but people who think like this are extremely stupid. The truly smart people were not happy at all at this moment, but instead frowned. In the garden of a certain house, 3 or 5 friends were drinking tea together. Someone looked around and saw that no one was eavesdropping, so he whispered, "The national treasury is empty, and the emperor can't bear it any longer. This is using the matter of subjugating the government to beat everyone, asking everyone to take the initiative to share the country's worries. Yes, I can see it too. However, our families have just moved from Kyoto and have just established their feet. Our energy is severely damaged and we are really helpless." A person next to him turned the jade ring on his hand and frowned. Seems very embarrassed. It's a pity that no one believed this. After all, the jade ring he was playing with was the best of blood jade. It was a small piece that could not be bought for 2 or 3,000 taels. But no one opened their mouth to expose it because they didn't want to take money out. Someone said, "Speaking of which, the emperor is impatient. When the autumn harvest comes and the grain and tax revenue comes, everything will be solved." Yes, someone else said, there is also the Northern Expedition Army. Every time they go out for an expedition, they spend a lot of money and food, which is really a waste. The barbarians on the left and right can't reach the south of the Yangtze River, so why go to the north of the Yangtze River to fight with the barbarians? Humph, if you don't go to Jiangbei, how can the Marquis of Xinting achieve great fame? That is, the Jinsha River is naturally dangerous and the barbarians are fierce. How can they still grow wings and fly over? In the final analysis, it is the Marquis of Xinting who is instigating the emperor and talking about regaining the mountains and rivers every day. You must know that now that Tianwu's vitality has been severely damaged, he has rested and recuperated for 10 or 20 years, restored his national strength, and then slowly plots to expel the barbarians. It is nothing not good. Everyone talked about this matter and they all agreed. As for donating money and sharing worries for the country, they have long deliberately forgotten them. Let's see about it later. Maybe the emperor punishes the Duke of Genkuo, but he can't see it for the moment. Not to mention the murmurings, speculations and evasions among the families in Kyoto behind their backs. It is just that the Jiangning Marquis mansion also received the marriage decree. Unlike the joy of the Genkuo mansion, the entire Wu family was in a state of shock. Marquis Jiangning and his wife, who were over 70 years old, as well as the gray-haired eldest son and his wife, and the second son and his wife, were all sitting in the hall, all looking bad. Especially the second lady, who had already pulled off her handkerchief and wiped her tears, and choked in a low voice, "Everyone in the family knows Lianer's thoughts. I thought that with the Queen's presence, she would definitely have her wishes come true. Who would have thought that she was suddenly grant a marriage to that dandy prince? Isn't the Queen in the palace? Why is there no news at all?" She didn't even stop the emperor. After hearing this, she blamed the Queen. The Queen's mother, the Crown Prince's wife, was unhappy. She originally wanted to persuade her sister-in-law to help her think of a solution, but then she changed her mind and responded calmly, "What my sister and I said is wrong. You also said that the Queen is the Queen, not the Emperor. The Emperor wants to grant a marriage, how can the Queen stop her? Are you going to remonstrate me to death? Don't say that the Queen will not be able to survive in the palace in the future, even our entire prince's mansion will be entangled. Do my brothers and sisters want to bring everyone down just because of Bai Lian?" "I'm not," the second lady said anxiously. "Then you can't look at it like this. I told you before that I wanted the Queen to talk to the Emperor more about the marriage between Lianer and Xinting Hao, but there has been no news. It's okay now. Lianer has been given a marriage to someone else. She just passed out and she doesn't know what to do when she wakes up." As she spoke, the second lady cried even harder, "My poor daughter, I didn't get pregnant until I was almost 30 years old. She is naturally beautiful, smart, and dignified. Why is her life so miserable? The old man Ho and Mrs. Ho had a headache from her crying. Mrs. Ho stopped crying and said, "Stop crying, the matter has already happened. Let's think of a way and see how to solve it." The second lady wiped away her tears and choked with sobs, "Mother, that's an imperial edict. I can only let the queen go to the emperor. The queen is Leonor's sister, and she definitely doesn't want Leonor to marry a dandy. If Leonor can marry Xintinghao has military power and is also a good helper for the queen." "Shut up," this time it was the old marquis who said angrily. He subconsciously looked outside the door, and when he saw no outsiders, he glared at his brainless daughter-in-law with a dark face. "What nonsense are you talking about? If this word spreads, the whole family will not want it dead. There are some things that you can plan, but you can never say out loud. What does the Queen's family plan to do to gain military power? Rebellion." The second lady also knew that she had said the wrong thing and shrank her neck. "I am also too worried about Leonor." The second master couldn't ignore his wife, and he felt sorry for his daughter, so he begged his father, "Father, don't worry about it so much. Please ask my sister-in-law to go to the palace as soon as possible." The old marquis nodded and did not say what his granddaughter thought. He only said that their marquis's house could not marry with the town's duke's house under any circumstances. Zheng Qiagong had no real power at all. He only knew that his neck was shrinking, but his son was not a device. Just this time, the emperor took advantage of him and cut off a big piece of meat. Now everyone treats the Duke of Zhen as a fat pig. The Wu family is the queen's family, how can they be related to a pig? The old marquis sighed and said, "Come into the palace, let the queen beg the emperor properly, and it is best to withdraw the decree. Even if Leonor cannot marry the Marquis of Xinting, she must not marry the Duke of Zhenqiu." The crown prince's wife could not disobey her father-in-law's orders, but she was unsure in her heart, so she could only say, "I will talk to the queen carefully, but I am afraid there is no room for relaxation on this matter. After all, I have never heard that the imperial edict can be withdrawn. Of course everyone here knows this, but no one is willing to do it. We still have to give it a try." The prince's wife was helpless, so she stood up and left. "You have to send someone to deliver a sign to enter the palace, you have to change your clothes, and you have to prepare things as an excuse to enter the palace." Fortunately, the third princess was celebrating her birthday, and the family specially made a set of jewelry. She was planning to walk out, but when she stepped in and out of the door, a woman ran over to her and shouted, "Oh no, something happened." End of this chapter. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 574. Chapter 574 The Heavy Price of Victory. Everyone stood up in shock. The prince's wife scolded the mother-in-law and cursed, "How presumptuous! If anything happens, report it immediately. Why are you making such a noise?" The woman fell to her knees and replied in panic, "Miss Lian, when she woke up from a drowsy sleep, she rushed out. No one could stop her. She was already out of the house now." "What? Leonor, Leonor," the second lady's legs went weak at that time and she cried, "She must be seeking death. Get my Leonor back quickly." Others also looked bad, so they couldn't help but blame the girl for being ignorant. At this time, it was impossible for her to rush out and seek death. If you really want to die, you can do it at home. It is convenient whether it is thrown into a well or hoisted. Therefore, the most likely way for her to go out is to go to the Zhenqiu palace to cancel the engagement, or to find the Marquis of Xinting to express her feelings, or to go to the palace to ask the queen's cousin to help intercede and let the emperor take back his decree. But no matter which one, she is not something a girl can do. The old marquis had a dark face and ordered, "Go and get her back." At this time, don't you think the family is not embarrassed enough? Everyone hurriedly responded to the call. The prince's wife still wanted to enter the palace, so the prince and the second master took their servants to find someone. Only the second lady could not go out or enter the palace. She could only cry non-stop, which made the old Marquis and Madame Ho even more unhappy. The old couple only gave birth to 2 sons, both of whom were legitimate sons. Logically speaking, brothers and sisters should respect each other and rely on and support each other. However, the second child and his wife always felt that they were partial as parents, so the eldest son inherited the title, and the eldest daughter also became the queen. So, the second son and his wife both looked forward to marrying their daughter to Xintinghao. Even if she cannot be as glorious as the queen, at least she is a marquis, and can be on an equal footing with her own family in the future. Now, the wishes of the second couple have come true, and I am afraid that the peaceful days at home are coming to an end. If the Duke of Zhen was here at this moment, he would definitely feel a sense of superiority in his heart. He only has one son, which is good, at least he won't cause brotherhood to fight. In front of the gate of Xintinghao mansion, the chief steward kept looking around. A porter boy came forward and spoke with a smile, "Butler, please go in and have a sip of tea. The Marquis has gone to the wounded barracks, and I'm afraid he won't be back soon." "What kind of tea are you drinking?" the butler glared and said angrily, "You don't even think about it. The injured barracks are all soldiers who have followed the Marquis through life and death. Now they are either missing arms or have broken legs. I don't know how uncomfortable the Marquis is. Woolen cloth. Let me tell you, I will take good care of you when the Marquis comes back soon. If you dare to cause trouble to the Marquis at this time, don't blame me for taking action." "No, no," the boy quickly assured, "don't worry, butler, the Marquis comes back only a few days a year. We are rushing to serve him and it's too late. How can we cause trouble to the Marquis?" "That's pretty much it." The butler was satisfied and looked out again. Just then, a carriage hurried over. His eyes lit up, thinking that the Marquis was back, but when he was about to greet him, he found that it was not his carriage at all. He guessed who was coming to see him, so he thought about sending the person away quickly. However, the carriage stopped and a girl in purple jumped out. This girl looks about 16 or 17 years old, with good looks, but her eyes are red and swollen from crying for unknown reasons, her hair is disheveled, and she is a little embarrassed. The housekeeper always felt familiar, and when he wanted to ask a few questions, the coachman said first, "Girl, you haven't paid the fare yet, it's 10 cents. The girl in purple clothes was looking up at the plaque of the Marquis mansion. When she heard this, she became angry. She pulled a hairpin off her head and threw it over. "Get out of here, miss." The coachman took the hairpin, and after just one glance, he whipped up his whip and drove the coach, running like crazy without a trace. The corner of the steward's mouth twitched uncontrollably. That is a gold hairpin inlaid with red treasures. Not counting the materials, the labor cost for making it is only 10 taels of silver. This girl was just thrown to others. She was really, such a waste. From now on, whoever marries this girl will be really unlucky. As a result, the girl looked at him for a long time, then turned to look at him and said, "Where is your Marquis? Let him come out. I want to ask him, why don't you marry me?" The butler's feet were weak and he almost fell down at the foot of the steps. This prodigal daughter actually wants to enter the prince's mansion. He calmed down and looked at the girl carefully again, and finally remembered that she was the legitimate daughter of the second wife of Zhongning Ho mansion and the queen's cousin. Today, as soon as the Marquis of Zhongning received the marriage decree, this girl came to make trouble. What's going on? If someone who didn't understand saw it, they would think that the Marquis had an affair with this girl, and they got into trouble and finally gave up. He was madly complaining in his heart, his face was not good looking, and he said loudly, "Miss Wu, don't be joking. Our Lord Marquis has been fighting abroad all the time. I'm afraid he doesn't even know you, So why are you talking about whether to marry or not? Moreover, you are today I've just been given a marriage, so I'd better go home and prepare for it. An embarrassed girl stood in front of the gate of the Ho mansion, confronting the housekeeper of the Ho mansion. This scene was definitely not common, and now it had attracted scattered passers-by to take a peek. The housekeeper deliberately made his words clearer, hoping that the young lady of the Wu family would retreat when the situation was difficult. It's a pity that Miss Wu doesn't appreciate it at all. She lifted up her skirt and was about to rush into the Marquis's mansion. I want to see the Marquis. Why doesn't he marry me? What's wrong with me? The housekeeper was very angry. This girl couldn't understand human language. He quickly stopped, but he didn't dare to pull the girl, so he was very passive for a while. At this moment, Mr. Ho finally came back. As soon as the carriage door opened, Mr. Ho jumped out first, followed by Li Laoer. Mr. Ho frowned, and Mr. Li also had a bad look on his face. The world has always only seen victory, but they don't know the price behind these two words. When he went on an expedition, even though the Marquis had planned carefully and even took the lead in every battle, there were still casualties in the army. Throughout the day, they visited all the wounded soldiers, recorded their names in a book, and selected those who could be sent to Broken Gold Beach. Although this news was announced to the wounded soldiers a few days ago by the Marquis, hoping that the wounded soldiers could have some hope of survival. However, some people are still thinking of ways to seek death these days. Some people were saved, others succeeded. Among these wounded soldiers, some have parents and family members. If given more pensions, they can return to their hometowns to marry wives and have children. At least they have someone to rely on and a way out. But more people don't have family members, or they have family members but don't want to support another burdensome person. Perhaps knowing this, they chose to end their lives with their own hands. In their opinion, it is better to die with dignity than to end up begging on the street and dying in a smelly ditch. Li Laoer was also in a heavy mood. He really wanted to drag all the wounded soldiers back to Broken Gold Beach, but he couldn't. The livelihood of so many people must be discussed with their families. Otherwise, even if the village is willing to support them, these wounded soldiers will not be willing to be wastes who can only eat and sleep every day. He vaguely felt that his niece might have a solution to this matter. When he goes home tomorrow, he might as well ask his niece first. End of this chapter. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 575. Chapter 575. Whether it's true or false, it doesn't matter. Master Ho. The butler has sharp eyes, and when he saw the Marquis, he felt like he had seen a savior, but then he thought of Miss Wu's identity, and he didn't want the Marquis to get into trouble. So he pulled his neck and shouted, "Master Marquis, come into the house quickly. There is a little something here, and I can handle it." Before the Marquis could speak, Miss Wu also noticed the Marquis. She quickly let go of the housekeeper and hurriedly arranged her dress and hair, trying to restore herself to her former beauty. The Marquis glanced at her, his brows furrowed even deeper, but he didn't say anything and walked in with Li Laoer. Miss Wu didn't expect that the Marquis would really ignore her, so she became anxious and shouted loudly, "Master Marquis, I'm here to find you." Mr. Ho stopped and asked calmly, "What do you want from me?" The housekeeper still wanted to stop me, but Miss Wu was afraid that she would not have a chance to speak, so she blurted out, "I want to ask you why you don't want to marry me. If you are willing to marry me, there will be no gift of marriage, and I won't have to marry anyone else." The Marquis raised his eyebrows and looked at the girl in front of him carefully. Although she was in a sorry state, her dress was very delicate, and the red treasures on her ears reflected the light of the setting sun, making her very dazzling. He also remembered whose girl this was. Needless to say, she had been raised pampered since she was a child and had no knowledge of the sufferings of the world. Think again of those soldiers with mutilated limbs in the sick and wounded camps, those cold corpses who committed suicide in despair. They are just like the girl in front of me, they are all human beings, sons and daughters. But after one party shed blood and sacrificed his life for the country, he shed tears and died, while the other party was full of vanity and love, wearing gold and silver, and enjoying all the splendor. How annoying! How ridiculous! He was irritable and violent for no reason, and he couldn't suppress it no matter how hard he tried. "What's so good about you, why should I marry you?" the Marquis asked with a sneer. Miss Wu was stunned for a moment by the question, and replied anxiously, "I am the legitimate daughter of the Marquis of Jiangning, and the Queen is my cousin. I am beautiful and gentle." "Humph," the Marquis snorted coldly and asked sternly, "What about the Jiangning Marquis mansion?" "Tianwu has lost half of his country and is barely surviving in the south of the Yangtze River. Jiangning Marquis mansion has only one person. In addition to living in a dream and dying every day, has anyone done anything for Tianwu? Partial force? The Queen is your cousin? So what? She is the Queen, not you." As the Marquis spoke, his eyes became more disdainful and sarcastic. "Beautiful and gentle? This is even more useless. Could it be that the barbarians from Jiangbei are charging towards you, and if you stand in front of the formation, they will stop attacking because of your beauty and gentleness? What a joke." Miss Wu seemed to have had her gorgeous coat stripped off layer by layer, and was criticized for being worthless. Her throat was severely clogged, and her heart felt as if there was a piece of charcoal stuck in her heart. She was anxious and painful, and tears finally fell down with thunderbolts. Seeing her like this, the Marquis finally found some sense, took a deep breath, suppressed the anger in his heart, and finally said, "Don't say that I don't want to marry a wife. Even if I want to marry one day, she can fly with me in the sky, an eagle that fights the wind and rain, not a canary like you that just chirps and shows off its beautiful feathers." After saying that, he turned around and entered the Marquis mansion. Miss Wu's face was covered with tears. She shouted with all her strength, "But, I really like you. I've liked you since I was 10 years old. I'm not vain, I just like you." It's a pity that the Marquis didn't stop at all. He didn't know whether he didn't hear it, or he didn't care if he heard it. Li Lauer followed behind Mr. Ho, but looked back and sighed slightly in his heart. This girl is really unlucky. She was born in the Wu family, and she chose to express her true love at such a juncture. Isn't she actively seeking abuse? The Marquis of Jiangning wanted to marry his daughter into the Marquis's house. They wanted to see the Marquis's military power and the Emperor's reliance on him. The Marquis of Jiangning wanted to gain a backer for his family and also give the Queen some help. It's a pity that the idea is good, but it's just a lice on a bald man's head, and everyone can see it clearly. No matter whether the Emperor or the Marquis, no one will let them get what they want. Today, the Marquis is worried about the wounded soldiers. Miss Wu came to block the door again. It's strange that it ended well. If this girl is really vain and her plan fails, she will be disappointed and angry at most, but now it seems that this girl is actually somewhat sincere. This is really tragic. The housekeeper stretched out his arms to stop Miss Wu, who was about to rush in. He had a huge headache. There are many girls who like the Marquis in Kyoto. If all of them come to visit him, he really doesn't have to do anything else. Guarding the door every day is not enough. Fortunately, the people from Jiangning Hao Mansion finally arrived. I don't know which master of the Hou Mansion led the team. Perhaps he saw that there were too many people watching and didn't get out of the car at all. He directly ordered the nanny and the maids to rush forward, help the crying young lady and left. Ms. Wu didn't know whether she gave up or was too sad, so she didn't struggle anymore. She let them help her get into the carriage, and soon she disappeared. The idle people watching looked satisfied and quickly turned around and ran away. The butler was left pulling at his messy clothes, sighing and cursing. What a worldly thing this is, women should stop being reserved. In the backyard academy, Mr. Ho took off his gown and threw it aside, and then sat with Li Lauer by the window to drink tea. The tea was light and his brows furrowed even more tightly. Fortunately, the butler came in later and brought 2 glasses of passion fruit drink with ice. After drinking a glass of cold and sweet fruit, the 2 of them took a long breath and felt much more relaxed. Li Lauer thought for a while and said, "Master Ho, the girl just said that she has known Mr. Ho since she was a child. Maybe she was sincere." The Marquis waved his hand and said, "I must have met her a few times before going in and out of the palace. She was just a child and didn't pay much attention to her. Her sincerity and falsehood are not important. What is important is the calculations of the Zhongning mansion. The emperor will definitely not allow it. Her wishes as a girl could not change anything. What's more, although I don't want to be entangled in the Zhongning Haofu's calculations, I won't ruin the rest of a girl's life. Although the eldest son of the Zhenqiu Duke is incompetent and mediocre, he can live a safe life after marrying him, which is a good thing for a woman's place of rest. As for Zhongning Haofu, if you don't know how to restrain yourself, you will definitely not end well in the future. If this girl gets married, she can save herself." After saying that, he changed his subject and said, "I plan to open a few workshops to house the wounded soldiers and let them support themselves, but I haven't figured out what exactly I want to produce." Li Lauer's eyes lit up. "I was thinking about this just now. That kid Fu Niu has a very active mind and knows a lot of new things. For example, this fruit drink looks very simple, but no one else can figure it out. Don't underestimate this thing. There is only one Luoan Academy, which can make more than 10 taels a month. There is also Cyclamen, which also sells hundreds of cups a day. If Fu Niu really has a good idea, it shouldn't be difficult to open a workshop without expecting to get rich, just for food and clothing." The Marquis was very excited after hearing this. He stood up, put on his clothes again, and said, "Let's go home and eat." Li Lauer also stood up with a smile. "I originally wanted to try the cooking skills of the Haofu chef, but I was disappointed again." The housekeeper had just gone to the kitchen to arrange dinner, but when he came back, he saw his master walking out. His face was really as bitter as a bitter gourd. But he couldn't stop him. He could only send his master away and cursed in a low voice, "It's all the fault of that dead girl from the Wu family." If she hadn't come to make a fuss, the Marquis would have stayed in the house. At this moment, the Wu family is also scolding the Ho mansion. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 576. Chapter 576, All the ladies in the world are the same. Mrs. Wu hugged her puppet-like daughter and cried almost to death. Mr. Wu also walked all over the floor with his hands behind his back, frowning tightly, and said angrily, "It's useless to just cry. If you can make Xintinghao like you, why would the family be so plotting?" Seeing her daughter start to cry, Mrs. Wu quickly kicked her husband away, and then asked her daughter, "Lian'er, tell me, what's going on? You told the Marquis that you liked him. What did he say?" "The emperor values him very much. If he pleads for mercy, the emperor might be able to take back his will. When the time comes and you marry into the Marquis mansion, you will be the Marquis of Xinting. Even if you are your cousin, even though she is a queen, she will still rely on you and please you. Moreover, there are no old people in the Xintinghao mansion. You will be the master of the house when you enter the house. All the property in the Ho mansion will be yours." The more she talked, the more excited she became, as if everything was right in front of her, at her fingertips, but she didn't realize that her daughter, who was still crying, had become calmer and calmer. "Mother," the Marquis said that he only wanted to regain the lost territory in Jiangbei and had no intention of marrying. "I will prepare for the marriage with peace of mind in the future. I will marry to the Genkuo Palace and there will be no more noise. Don't worry." After saying that, she called the maid, "Prepare some water, I want to take a bath." Mrs. Wu was stunned for a long time, and finally reacted. She became anxious and said, "No, Leonor, you can't do this. You have to fight for it. That's Mrs. Ho. Your aunt will definitely not be able to do her best. You will have to follow her tomorrow. I will go into the palace to find the queen." Unfortunately, her daughter didn't listen at all. She got up and went into the bathroom and closed the door. Sitting in the warm water, with no one else in the room, the heartbroken girl completely let herself cry. "Why don't you believe it? I've liked you since I was 10 years old. At that time, you were walking on the path in the palace, as bright as the sun at noon. It's a pity that you never looked at me twice as you said, 'You are the eagle and I am the canary. I am not worthy of you, but I still like. My family is plotting against you, but I'm not. I just like you. Why don't you believe me?' The setting sun has completely set behind the horizon, and the sky is dim. Some birds landed on the branches outside the window, tilted their heads and listened carefully to the faint cries in the room, and finally fluttered their wings and flew away. In the yard of Lee's family in Broken Gold Beach, smoke was rising from the kitchen roof. Jian sat on the threshold with a small bowl in his arms, eating with a greasy mouth. From time to time he turned around to complain to his mother coquettishly. "Mom, I haven't fried meatballs for a long time. From now on, I will fry them every day. Okay, there are also braised meatballs, steamed meatballs, and meatball soup. I like them all." Tao Hongying was almost busy and was washing her hands at the door. When she heard what her greedy girl said, she wiped a few drops of water on her body and scolded her with a smile, "You've become a mean-spirited person today. When I see Dr. Zhang tomorrow, I will agree with her," he said, "give you more homework." "Mother," Jian shrank her neck and quickly begged for mercy, "Mother, please do a good job and spare your daughter's life. Grandpa Zhang is crazy enough, don't provoke him anymore, please let me go, please let me go." Her strange voice made Tao Hongying, and he and Shui Yun all laugh. Tao Hongying stepped forward, hit her daughter, and said angrily, "Did Dr. Zhang give you some medicine? Why are you talking more and more strangely? Where did you learn these weird words?" Jian smiled with her teeth bared, lowered her head and took another bite of the meatball. As a result, the small tooth next to Huaye removed again, and she let out a cry of pain. In fact, this tooth has been active for a few days, but she did not dare to pull it out. She always thought that it would be better to wait and fall out automatically. But when it comes to delicious food, her little teeth hinder her performance. Tao Hongying noticed something strange, so she hugged her daughter, sat in her arms, and coaxed her, "Are you losing another tooth? Mom, look, which one is it?" Jian didn't have any doubts. She opened her mouth and let my mother fumble for her teeth. From time to time, she would mumble and yell, "Mom, don't touch the one on the left, it hurts." Tao Hongying responded with a smile, "Don't worry, I won't touch it, I'm just taking a look." The next moment, Jian jumped up with a cry and spat out a mouthful of blood-stained saliva. Tao Hongying is holding a small white tooth in her hand. "Ah! Mom, you lied to me, you said you didn't move, you just touched me." You lied, Jian complained with a grin. Her saliva was mixed with blood and dripped from her chin. It looked very tragic. Just as Tao Hongying was about to speak, someone rushed in from outside the courtyard like the wind, and picked up the crying Jian. "What happened?" Mr. Ho asked coldly. He and Li Lao heard Jian's cry as soon as they got out of the car. They were so shocked that their hearts almost jumped out of their chests. It wasn't until this moment when he held the child in his arms that he could feel relieved. Tao Hongying quickly raised the little white tooth in her hand and said, "Well, I'm just going to pull out a baby tooth for Fu Niuer. It is obvious that she gave birth to her own daughter, and it was for the sake of her own daughter's own good, but now why is she as guilty as a stepmother who treats her child harshly?" Li Laoer also came in a hurry. He accidentally kicked his big toe on the threshold. He held his foot and rolled around in pain. He grinned and said, "As long as it's okay, it's okay. I thought there was an assassin in the house." At this moment, Mrs. Li and Mr. Li, who were talking in the room, also rushed out. Old Mrs. Li didn't understand anything when she saw her guilty daughter-in-law and her tearful granddaughter, as well as the frightened Mr. Ho and Mr. Li. She took off the solace of her shoes and ran towards her daughter-in-law. "Are you a tiger? Those are the child's teeth. They were pulled out right away. Can't you wait any longer? Look at the child's mouth being filled with blood." Tao Hongying turned around and ran away, not forgetting to throw the little white tooth in her hand onto the roof. Li Laosi laughed and helped stop my mother. Mother, Hongying won't dare to do it next time, I really won't." Old Mrs. Li can't tear her son apart, not to mention that she didn't want to hit her daughter-in-law, she was just pretending to coax her granddaughter. So, Li Laosi easily took the solace of my mother's shoes and put them on again. The Marquis pulled up his sleeve to wipe the blood from the fat girl's mouth. When he saw her with tears in her eyes and her teeth bared, he couldn't help but laugh. This is why he looks forward to coming back no matter where he is. Full of the fireworks of the world, the most soothing thing is the heart. Soon, the family washed their hands and faces and sat down to eat. Jiyan has lost 2 teeth and is considered a 10th level disability. Now she is being taken care of and given preferential treatment by the whole family. The fish in the bowl is pickled, the ribs are boneless, and even the meatballs are cut into small pieces. To express her apology, Tao Hongying cooked a large bowl of meat porridge for her daughter. After eating and drinking, everyone spread out mats under the eaves of the corridor and sat chatting. Good News sat between Grandma and the Marquis, feeling a little drowsy but reluctant to leave. So, she staggered around, sometimes resting on her grandma's thigh, and sometimes hugging her adoptive father's arm. The Marquis was afraid that the fat girl would accumulate food if she slept like this, so he took the fat girl and asked, "Fu Niuer, my adoptive father wants to open a workshop to house the wounded soldiers. Do you have any good ideas?" When Jiyan heard this, he woke up and sat up immediately. End of this chapter. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 577. Chapter 577, Break down the bridge when crossing the river. How big of a workshop does your adoptive father plan to open and how much money will he invest? Jiyan's eyes were shining. It's not that this matter is profitable, but that she has always wanted to help her adoptive father, and now she finally has the opportunity. Everyone couldn't help but laugh when they saw her looking so positive. Mrs. Li rubbed her granddaughter's hair and joked, "Someday, Hongying will think about it carefully." When this child was born, was he holding money in his hands? Was it because we were too busy and didn't see it? This is simply the reincarnation of a money lover. He is just like everyone else, but when he mentions the word money, his eyes can't help but shine. Tao Hongying also smiled and agreed, "I think this child was born with a job in hand, and he has been greedy since he was a child." Jiyan was not angry when grandma and mother made fun of her. She gritted her teeth and said, "Grandma and mother are right. I was born with a rice bowl, and there was a big silver in the bowl." Bah, that's a beggar." Mrs. Li glared at her granddaughter, and everyone laughed even harder. Jiyan then sat down opposite her adoptive father and asked, "My adoptive father hasn't said yet, how big of a workshop will we need and how much money will we invest?" The Marquis thought for a while and said, "Excluding those who chose to return home and those who were resettled in our village, there are still more than 200 wounded soldiers brought back from this expedition. Among them, more than 80 are seriously injured. Heavy and inconvenient to move. They are competent at the best workshop work, and the wages they earn are enough to survive. As for the money invested, it should be within 1,000 taels. Hearing the good news, his little face turned into a smile. Father, I really have 2 ways here, please wait a moment. She got up and ran back to the backyard, and quickly brought 2 things over, a large folded paper and a handful of dry noodles. Everyone was curious. Ji-yin handed the dry noodles to the Marquis and said, Father, you should know about these noodles, right? My family always sends a lot of them to the dock. You and your father have also taken them out when you went on an expedition. As long as there is water, you can eat them. It will be more delicious if you eat it with meat sauce, right? Master Ho nodded and guessed, this kind of noodles is not afraid of spoilage and is really convenient to eat. Do you want to open a noodle workshop? Yes, foster father, making this noodle is a very troublesome process. It takes at least 3 days from rising to drying. It requires a lot of hands, and it doesn't require much movement. You can just sit down. Besides, the sales will definitely not be bad. After all, there are many people coming and going from the new capital to the southern state capitals every day. Even ordinary families carrying 2 kilograms of dry noodles during the New Year's Day, or visiting the elderly or women who have given birth. A great souvenir. Mrs. Lee couldn't help but interjected, Fu Niu is right. Life is not easy for ordinary people, and it is difficult to even eat a bowl of noodles. If you go to visit, it is indeed a good gift to bring 2 kilograms of dry noodles. Tao Hongying also said, these dry noodles are best sold with meat sauce. Then we need to open a farmhouse sauce workshop, which also requires manpower. Ji-yin smiled and praised Grandma and my mother. Grandma and my mother are so amazing, that's it? Tao Hongying said, Master Ho, leave this matter to me and my mother. We will make dry noodles tomorrow and see how many dry noodles are produced per pound of noodles. Calculate the cost, and then calculate how many people are needed for each process. Finally, let me tell you another fact. Fu Niu, this girl, has only seen us do it before, but has never done it. She can't do these things. Mom, you are trying to burn bridges across the river. I came up with a good idea, but you brushed me aside and despised me. Ji-yin pouted and complained, but was slapped by my mother. I gave birth to you. Why do I dislike you? Do you have any opinion? No, as long as you are happy. Ji-yin shrank his neck and hurriedly hid next to his adoptive father, making everyone laugh. The Marquis opened the big piece of paper and asked, Fu Niu, is this a map? Yes, it's a map, a simple map. Ji-yin became energetic again and said enthusiastically, Father, look, this map only shows the line along the canal to Quanzhou, with the prefectures, counties, and small towns on both sides. They were all simply marked by my brother. She pointed to a few places with pictures of steamed buns. Every time my uncle's fleet goes to these places, he has to buy things. Last time, I saw a man ask his uncle to take a package to one of these places and give it to his wife's uncle. For this reason, I even invited my uncle to drink. Thank you for your help. Father, what do you think about those people who don't know my uncle? They have letters or things to carry with them. Do they have to find other caravans? If they can't find them, can't they communicate the news? If we send veterans to settle in Zindu and these docks, mark the packages and letters collected from various places, and send them out. Then we can send the letters and packages sent from various places to the recipient's hands. That would definitely require a lot of people. And you can do this work even if you have no hands or feet. If you travel far, you can even buy a donkey cart. As the news spreads, you may not have to go everywhere to receive the goods, and people will find them at the door. Ji-yin said excitedly and pointed to the southwest location of the map. Also, foster father, if someone doesn't want to sit in the workshop or deliver packages and letters, then go explore. For example, here, there is a medicinal material called Panax noto ginseng. I have always wanted it, but my uncle's fleet only goes to Guangzhou and does not go here at all. There are also many delicious fruits here, and I want them too. After saying that, she pointed to the location of Jiangbei and said, "Father, these veterans are most familiar with Jiangbei. If any wealthy family in Zindu wants to find something more valuable or rescue someone, or like the Guo family, they definitely want to recover the bones of their children and grandchildren. I am afraid they will be willing to spend a lot of money to hire people." Before Ji Yin could say anything, he was suddenly picked up by the Marquis and spun around in circles several times. "Fu Niu is so amazing, you helped my adoptive father solve a big problem. The good news made me dizzy, but it was rare to see my adoptive father so happy, so he also started to giggle." Li Laoer was also smiling from ear to ear. "We still need Fu Niu to take action. Mr. Ho has been frowning for a day, and he even scolded the young lady from the Wu family away." "Who is Miss Wu?" Mrs. Li was the first to ask. The flames of gossip among everyone were immediately ignited. Even Ji Yin grabbed his adoptive father by the collar and joined the melon-eating team at the speed of light. "Father, who is the Miss Wu family? Is she my future adoptive mother?" "No, don't listen to your uncle's nonsense." Mr. Ho coughed dryly, put down the good news and said, "You guys sit down, I will write down and sort out what Fu Niu said." After saying that, he strode back to the next door. Everyone couldn't help but snicker when they saw him like this, and finally pulled Li Laoer to investigate carefully. Li Laoer didn't know much, so he could only say, "In the afternoon, I was going to have dinner with the Marquis at the Marquis mansion to discuss the placement of wounded soldiers, but as soon as I arrived at the gate of the Marquis mansion, I was stopped by a girl. The girl said that she was from the Marquis of Jiangning's mansion, that she had liked the Marquis since she was a child, and asked why the Marquis didn't want to marry her." End of this chapter. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 578. Chapter 578. The most ruthless person in history. Jianing Haofu. "Oh, is this the cousin whom the queen sent to her adoptive father?" Ji Yin reacted first and asked, "Second uncle, what is this girl's name?" Li Laoer thought for a while and said, "The Marquis was in a bad mood because of the placement of injured soldiers, and he was not too polite to the girl. The girl seemed sad. I looked pitiful and tried to persuade her, but the Marquis didn't do anything either. Let go. When I came back from my trip, I asked the chief steward. The chief steward said that this girl's surname is Wu, her name is Billion, and she is the legitimate daughter of the second wife of Jiangning Ho Mansion." "Billion, Wu Billion?" Ji Yin was stunned for a moment, then rolled on the mat with her belly in her arms. "Ha ha ha, Billion, Wu Billion. Who gave the girl this name? It's so careless." Everyone looked at the fat girl rolling on the ground and really didn't understand why she was smiling like this. "Is there something wrong with this name? Lotus is a noble flower that can emerge from the mud without being stained. Women often use this word." Ji Yin got up and rubbed the tears from the corners of his eyes. Then he looked at everyone's expressions and grimaced, "Am I the only one who knows this? Wow, life is so lonely." Mrs. Li raised her hand and patted her granddaughter, hugged her and helped her to fix her dress and hair. She said angrily, "This girl is getting more and more crazy. It's just a name. Why is it so funny?" Ji Yin smiled and hugged her grandma's neck, and begged, "Grandma, when my sisters-in-law give birth to little nieces, they must not name them with words like lotus or tea, okay? Okay, okay, I'll let you name your little niece." It's settled. Mrs. Li couldn't do anything about her granddaughter, so she said casually. At this time, the night was getting dark, and everyone went back to sleep after chatting for a few words. But deep in the inner courtyard of the palace, the emperor and the queen, the most noble couple in the world, were not asleep yet. The emperor is not considered a lecherous person, and there are only a dozen or so concubines in the entire harem. As the head wife, the queen always has the opportunity to sleep with her twice a month. Today is a rare occasion to welcome the emperor. Of course, the food is what the emperor likes to eat, the tea is also what the emperor is accustomed to drinking, and even the potted flowers in the room are peonies that the emperor likes. The emperor was also in a good mood. The Duke of Genkuo took care of the country's worries and donated the 100,000 taels of silver, and allocated most of it to the Ministry of Works to repair the river. With tens of thousands taels left, he wanted to make a pension. But in the court, those old foxes were blocking him with a bunch of excuses. All the yeomen are asking for money. Earlier, they were worried about Xintinghao's expression, but in the past few days, seeing that Xintinghao didn't speak, they became bolder. Some people even said that the northern expedition was not a victory because there were too many casualties. However, how could they know that if they are jumping happily now, they will fall hard later? Just thinking about the expressions on these people's faces as if they were struck by lightning when the news of the conscription is announced, the emperor couldn't help but want to laugh. The queen was sitting opposite the emperor, and saw him holding a tea bowl with a smile on his lips, which was a little strange. There must be no happy events in the court recently, right? But regardless of the reason, the emperor is in a good mood, which is a good opportunity for her. She thought for a while and sighed, "Your Majesty, today my concubine's mother came into the palace and told me that Lienor did not want to marry the Prince of Genkuo and was seeking death in the palace. My grandfather and grandmother are so old. When I got older, I also had troubles and worries, and almost fell ill. I'm not saying that the emperor's marriage is wrong, but, the Prince of Genkuo is really bad. He can't do anything in literature or military, and he hangs around in brothels all day long." The emperor turned cold, put down the tea bowl, and asked calmly, "You are saying that the Prince Zhenguo is not worthy of your girl from the Jiangning Marquis mansion, then who is worthy?" The queen couldn't tell whether the emperor was angry or not, so she seemed to flinch, but after a moment of hesitation, she still said bravely, "Your Majesty, you have also met Lienor. She is gentle, smart, and beautiful. She is really a good girl. It is rare. His temperament is also lively. The Marquis of Xinting has been busy with military affairs all day long, and there is no one in the palace to take care of food, clothing, housing, and transportation. It is the best time to marry a girl like Lienor. At least when he comes home after a busy day, he will have someone to talk to and eat, which will be more lively." Can the emperor withdraw his decree and let Lienor not be married to the Duke of Genkuo, but to marry the Marquis? She was interrupted by the emperor when she was halfway through speaking. The emperor sneered and said, "Since Lienor is such a good girl, she might as well enter the palace." "No," the queen subconsciously objected. Looking at the emperor's cold face, she hurriedly explained, "Your Majesty, I am not saying that you are not worthy of Lienor. No, no, it is Lienor that is not worthy of you." The emperor stood up directly and smiled sarcastically, "Queen, tell your family not to look at you. Otherwise, it won't be a troublesome thing if I change the queen." After saying that, he flicked his sleeves and walked away. Mr. Yi, who was guarding the door, glanced at the frightened and stunned queen in a hurry, and couldn't help but curse idiot in his heart. The emperor was rarely in a good mood, and it was ruined just like this. Everyone in the world thought that Marquis Xinting was bent on regaining half of the country and had no intention of marrying a wife. Some even said that Marquis Xinting was drunk by the Li family, so he gave the Marquis mansion to the little girl of the Li family. Actually, he would say that Marquis Xinting is the real smart man. The reason why all emperors have more trust in lonely ministers is because the lonely ministers are only loyal to the emperor and will not be affected by anything. Xintinghao is the most ruthless. He not only wants to be a lonely minister, but also plans to be alone for the rest of his life. The only people close to him, apart from the emperor, are a group of peasants with mud-legged backgrounds. This group of farmers is more loyal than the rich and powerful. Even if they grow a melon or fruit, Dion will bring it to the emperor for the first bite. How could the emperor allow the queen's family to win over such a new prince? Not to mention how Manager Yi managed to make the emperor happy. He only said that the queen was so angry that she smashed the teapot and teacup, then lay down on the soft couch and started crying. Her dowry mother quickly had the door closed, and then whispered to console her, "My queen, don't be sad." The emperor probably went back because he was busy with government affairs. The emperor will definitely come again in the future. You are the head wife, and the emperor loves no one. I can't get past you. The queen pulled off the veil, wiped her face fiercely, and said angrily, "What's the legal wife? When did he ever take me as the legal wife in his eyes? In this harem, he has nice words for everyone, but only when he comes to me, he frowns. Cold eyes." Mammy sighed in her heart. Men like those who are gentle and have the same heart as him. The queen kept quarreling with the emperor over the family, and it was strange that the emperor was happy. She thought for a while and then advised, "Mother, although the Marquis mansion is your mother's clan, you still shouldn't interfere too much. You have done your best for Miss Lian's marriage. It's time for the Empress to think about herself. For example, take good care of her body as soon as possible and give birth to a prince. This is the emperor's legitimate son. Even if he doesn't occupy the elder brother, he still occupies the title of legitimate son from now on." She didn't finish what she said, but the queen had already understood. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 579. Chapter 579. Money is a man's waste. She subconsciously touched her belly. After giving birth to the third princess, she had never been pregnant again. Firstly, it was because her childbirth had damaged her foundation, and secondly, it was also because the emperor was less present. Why does the emperor come less often? It's because every time we meet, she will mention her family, pray for grace for her family, and plan for her cousin to marry the Marquis Inting. In saying that, she really put the cart before the horse. As long as she gives birth to a legitimate son, and the mother is more valuable than the son, the Wu family will naturally rise. "Yes, Mama is right, find a doctor for me, I need to take care of my body," she immediately ordered. Her heart suddenly brightened. Mammy breathed a long sigh of relief, smiled and persuaded, "It's already this time, and I've called the imperial doctor. Outsiders thought you were not in good health, so I don't know how harsh the words would be. Mother, have a good sleep. Tomorrow is the day to ask for Ping An's pulse. It's best to ask the imperial doctor for diagnosis and treatment together." "Okay, that's the arrangement." The queen didn't insist anymore, and quickly washed up and went to bed under the care of her nanny. At this time, everyone in the Zhongningho mansion was still wondering whether the queen could make the emperor change his mind. How could I have imagined that the emperor did not change his mind, but the queen changed first? The sun rises and the moon sets, the days pass by, and the seasons are quietly changing. Although the sun during the day still makes people's scalp hot, the morning breeze has already brought a cool feeling when I get up early. Needless to say, autumn is coming soon. And Jiyan's birthday is coming soon. Before this, there is still a Hungry Ghost festival to prepare for. Farmers are very busy at this time of year, so if they want to worship their ancestors, they can only keep things simple. Li Laozi came back from the expedition and had not been to Cyclamen yet, let alone his third brother's family and nephews, so he told his mother that he wanted to go for a walk and bring back some incense, candles, paper money, and tomorrow's Hungry Ghost festival. Just send it to the ancestors. Of course old Mrs. Li would not stop him, and simply asked him to take Tao Hongying with him, and the couple thought they were going out to relax. What if you are in a good mood and give her some grandchildren when you come back? Jian doesn't want to be a little tail, but she really can't help but want to join in the fun. Go shopping with my parents. I didn't have this opportunity in my previous life, so I can't let it go in this life. Fortunately, Mr. Li dotes on his daughter. Before going out, he directly carried her on his shoulders, then held his wife's hand with one hand, and shouted with a smile, "Let's go." Jiyan danced happily, which made Tao Hongying reach out to help her and said angrily, "Be careful if you fall, I won't take you into the city." Jiyan immediately hugged her father's neck, being honest and well-behaved. What did old Mrs. Li want to say? Three little foxes had already run out of the backyard and jumped onto Mr. Li's other shoulder. Mrs. Li had no choice but to wave her hand and said, "Let's go quickly. The house will be clean for 2 days." A family of 3 plus a little fox went out for a wander. Li Laozi was sitting on the shaft of the carriage, swinging his whip, listening to his wife and daughter teasing the little fox in the carriage, and the smile never left his lips. In the fields by the roadside, the crops that are about to mature are nodding gently with the breeze, creating a beautiful pastoral scene. He took a deep breath of the smell of earthy vegetation in the air, and suddenly felt that the fighting and danger on the battlefield were all worth it. What he guards is the happy days of his family, and what he guards is the peace and happiness of the world. The carriage entered the city all the way and stopped at the back gate of Cyclamen. Jia Huan was so happy when she saw her fourth uncle and his family coming. She had a lot of snacks and fruit drinks, and finally came to announce the good news happily. "Fourth aunt, the 2 new dishes you taught me are particularly popular. Many old customers have returned and brought new customers. Business is much better than before." Tao Hongying was also happy and whispered, "These 2 dishes, the rest are good, but the batter at the end is the key. The starch used is made from potatoes, and this must be kept secret." Jia Huan quickly lowered his voice and replied, "I know, fourth aunt, I do all the cooking myself, no one else is allowed to handle it." Jiyan joined in the fun, squeezed in and hugged the second brother's neck, and said, "Second brother, we will start harvesting potatoes soon. The potatoes in our village are not sold to outsiders, they are all kept for you. Then I will teach you some good dishes." The threshold of the custody restaurant was broken. Jia Huan beamed when he heard this. He hugged his sister and shook her from side to side, "Okay, my second brother made some money and bought you gems." When mentioning gems, everyone thought of Jian and Jiaxi who were going out. Although Li Zhensheng was following them, and Ji Yi and Lu Yang were also with them, they still couldn't help but worry. "Counting the days, it's time for our fleet to go back. I wonder if we can come back in time to celebrate the Mid-Autumn Festival," Tao Hongying asked. Jia Huan replied, "I'll definitely catch up. I want to go out when I'm not out, but I start to miss home again after I go out. I'm afraid my uncle and the others are anxious to go back." Jiyan said with a smile, "It's so hot in the south. Fourth brother and fifth brother are already dark. I'm afraid they won't even be found in the charcoal pile when they come back." Everyone laughed and said no more. After simply sitting for a while, the kitchen was about to get ready for dinner, and the kitchen started to get busy. The family of 3 sent the family to work, and then left. Li Laozi did not receive much pay for his expedition this time, but he led his men to overthrow many small barbarian camps and collected a lot of loot. After returning, these were handed over to the steward of the Marquis mansion to be sold secretly, and a total of more than 700 taels of silver were obtained. He insisted on giving half to his family, leaving nearly 400 taels left in his own hand. The money is in a man's waist and his wallet is bulging, so he plans to take his wife and daughter to spend a good time. So, even if Tao Hongying stopped her, he led his daughter into the largest silver building in Zindu. The 3 members of the family were not very dazzling in their attire today. They did not wear any expensive jewelry even for the good news. They only wore the usual collars around their necks. The three of them looked like ordinary wealthy people. But people in Yinlu rely entirely on their eyesight to eat this bowl of rice. Almost as soon as he entered the room, the shopkeeper's eyes were fixed on Ji Yin's necklace. This workmanship and craftsmanship must have come from the palace. So, he asked the boy to come forward and directly led the family of three to the second floor for tea. Tao Hongying originally cared about money. After all, she had come through hard times and frugality was ingrained in her bones. But her husband and daughter were in good spirits, and she really liked the jewelry on the counter. So, she simply joined in and bought it to her heart's content. But that being said, if she really wanted to buy a set of jewelry that cost 100 taels, she couldn't afford it. So, in the end, she chose a set of 4 silver hairpins in the shape of plums, orchids, bamboos, and chrysanthemums. They were very exquisite and not expensive. They spent a total of 30 taels of silver. Li Laosi chose a pair of silver bracelets for his wife. The pattern and color are very simple, which should be the style that the old lady likes. Ji Yin held the little fox and looked around, trying to find some special gadgets. At this time, several people came up from downstairs. At first, a woman looked very bad and shouted, "Everyone is dead. Don't you know how to come and take care of me? Hey guys, it's the end of the month, give Wawa a must-read ticket, tuck ball. It would be even better if you give it a good review, 5 stars or a good review, and prompt for updates. Maybe, the 4th update will drop tomorrow, go ahead." End of this chapter. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 580. Chapter 580. Where did this stupid family come from? The shopkeeper frowned, but still smiled and apologized to Li Laosi and his wife, and then hurried over. "Second Madam Wu, I'm late, I'm sorry." The shopkeeper bowed to the woman and apologized, and then said with a smile, "Second Madam, you want to add some jewelry, just tell me, and I'll take someone to send it directly to Ho. The house is just there, why bother to go there?" Seeing that the shopkeeper's attitude was so low and so attentive, Mrs. Wu snorted coldly and did not curse again. But his tone was still bad, and he shouted, "I want to prepare a birthday gift for the third princess in the palace. Bring out whatever good things you have here." After saying that, she was going to find a place to sit down. As a result, there were only 3 chairs in the room, one by itself and 2 opposite each other separated by a small tea table. She didn't want to sit on the single chair, so she settled on the 2 chairs Tao Hongying and Li Laosi were sitting on. Seeing that the 2 of them were wearing ordinary clothes, the evil fire in her heart came up, and she scolded the shopkeeper, "Your place is really getting worse and worse. All cats and dogs can go to the second floor? Clear the place quickly." These words were really unpleasant to hear. The shopkeeper was embarrassed, and Li Laosi and Tao Hongying looked even worse. The shopkeeper still wanted to smooth things over, so he said with a smile on his face, "Second Madam, there are, all the guests coming to our door. We also have a private room. Please come and sit down, it is cleaner there." Before he could finish speaking, Mrs. Wu had already stared, "You dog slave, can't you understand human language? Clear the place quickly. I have to choose jewelry. Can you bear the responsibility for delaying my entry into the palace?" At this time, Ji Yin had already hugged the little fox and came over. Mrs. Wu happened to see her. Her throat was about to be broken. She shouted loudly, "Why are there beasts here? Get rid of them quickly. Quickly quick." She kept waving her hands, as if the air couldn't be breathed because there was a little fox in the room. Ji Yin sneered and said, "That's right, we have chosen the jewelry well, why did this beast suddenly appear?" Just as Mrs. Wu was about to respond, she realized that what she said was wrong, and she became angry at the time, "Little beast, who are you scolding?" As she spoke, she raised her hand to say good news. Li Laozi is a complete doting lover. When he and his wife are scolded, he may want to settle the matter, but it is absolutely impossible for his daughter to be scolded and beaten. He stood up suddenly, stepped forward in 2 steps, grabbed Mrs. Wu's collar, and lifted her up. Mrs. Wu was suddenly suspended in the air, and her collar got stuck in her neck. She was so frightened that she kept screaming, and soon she couldn't scream anymore. Her face turned red from holding it in, and she could only scratch her hands and kick her feet. It was very funny. The 2 nuns who were waiting beside her probably didn't expect that someone would dare to make a move, and it took them a while to react. One of them rushed forward and tried to pull Li Laozi away, shouting, "How dare you? Let go of our wife, let go." Li Laozi didn't even look at her, he kicked her and made her lie down on her side. Another nun was a step late and wanted to save her master, but Tao Hongying pulled her hair from behind and threw her aside. Tao Hongying circles the pot every day, and her strength is one of the best among women. The nanny was still trying to get up, but she pulled the chair directly and got stuck on her back. This chair is like a turtle shell. The head, hands, and feet of the stuck nanny are outside, but the body is tightly pressed. Tao Hongying sat down firmly and pushed down the chair. The grandma was already fat and almost rolled her eyes. Let alone resisting, it would be nice to be able to take a breath. All this was said slowly, but it happened very quickly, at least the shopkeeper didn't react. It was just a few cracks. When he came to his senses, Mrs. Wu's face was already redder than a monkey's butt. He felt relieved in his heart, but he was more frightened. He wanted to persuade Li Laozi and his wife, but he didn't dare to speak. When he was hesitating whether to ask for help from the little girl Jiyan was clapping her hands and applauding her parents. "Dad is so awesome. Mom is so awesome too, so quick to strike." Even the little fox is squatting on Jiyan's shoulder, its tail wagging like a windmill. The shopkeeper couldn't help but his eyes darkened. Did he make a mistake? This family of 3 is not from a wealthy background, but is instead a ruthless gangster. Fortunately, Li Laozi didn't want to kill anyone. He held Mrs. Wu for a while and then threw her to the ground. "Whenever you go out again, clean your stinky mouth. Don't let me hear you scolding my daughter again. Do you dare to fight with my daughter, I will send you to see the Lord of Hell." Mrs. Wu was coughing desperately and could not speak at all. Jiyan, on the other hand, smiled and asked the shopkeeper, "Shopkeeper, which Wu family's second wife is she?" The shopkeeper had a grimace on his face and almost wanted to cry. "Oh God, where did this stupid family come from?" After the beating, I finally thought of asking him where he was from. He did not dare to respond, so he whispered, "This is the second lady of the Wu family of the Marquis of Jiangning Mansion." After saying that, he was afraid that the good news would not understand, so he explained to Li Laozi and his wife, "The queen is from the Jiangning Marquis Mansion, and this second lady is the queen's aunt." Li Laozi frowned, but didn't say anything. Jiyan blinked twice and said, "In other words, Marquis Jiangning is her father-in-law, and the queen is her husband's niece. So what does her husband do, and how big an official is he?" This. The shopkeeper was a little confused. He didn't understand what the good news was for asking these questions. Isn't the fact that the queen's maternal clan is scary enough? The shopkeeper gritted his teeth and said in an extremely low voice, "Second Master Wu is a 5th grade sinecure." Jiyan's eyes lit up at that moment. She caught the little fox and held it in her arms. She smiled so brightly that her eyes looked like crescent moons. "That'll be easy." Li Laozi also laughed, "Who do you think I am? I am so arrogant. It turns out that I am just a 5th-rank official's family member, and I am still a 4th-rank official." In this northern expedition, Li Laozi accumulated a lot of military exploits, and the Marquis has already reported the list of rewards to the Ministry of War. The Ministry of War was afraid that the Marquis would not be able to get his pension, and if they blocked the promotion of his subordinates, they would go crazy. So, without any hesitation, they sent it directly for approval. Just released a few days ago, Li Laozi is already a solid level 4 player. Although military generals' grades rise quickly, their status is not as high as that of civilian officials. But in terms of rank, Li Laozi is indeed enough to crush Mr. Wu. The shopkeeper was so anxious about this family that he couldn't help but persuade him, "My lord, that's not the way it is calculated. Mr. Wu is of the 5th rank, but he is the second son of Zhongning Haofu, and his niece is the queen." Just in time, Mrs. Wu had regained her breath. She climbed up crookedly and shouted, "You wait, if you dare to bully our prince's house, you are dead. My niece is the queen." Tao Hongying couldn't help it anymore, rolled her eyes at Mrs. Wu, and said mockingly, "You are really strange. Marquis Zhongning is your father-in-law. Whose daughter-in-law relies on her father-in-law's influence to dominate others. It's not like your husband is dead and you are married to him, so you are just the wife of a 5th-rank official. My husband is a 4th-rank official, so speaking of it, I am more noble than you. Besides, the queen is your niece, but she is only your niece. You are not the queen. What are you so arrogant about? Don't officials and wives have to learn the rules nowadays? You have really ruined the face of your family." Her voice was also loud and her words were fast. Not only Mrs. Wu heard this, but also several guests who came upstairs to watch the excitement at some time. End of this chapter.